Well, funny you should say that, Mark, because we're going to talk about podcasts.
Yes, we are.
The good and the bad. We are what makes a good podcast. And they are essentially taking Australia and the world by storm at the moment, with research finding that more than half of all Australians have listened to some sort of podcast. The number of listeners is growing every year, and Australia is producing some of the best podcasts from around the world.
Well, to celebrate the podcast and to tell us exactly what they are, we're talking now with founder Dave Gertler and General Manager Anna Riddel of the Australian Podcast Awards. The Australian Podcast Awards, what's that?
Well,
well, the Australian Podcast Awards has been founded, for the main purpose of giving Australian podcasters something to aspire towards and something to kind of dream about winning and help them improve their craft.
yeah, so it's basically created a platform to bring everyone together, because podcasting, when you create them, it can be very isolating. So someone in their bedroom or, in all different places. So we've brought them all together in the one place.
So I was just quoting a figure there of how many people are listening to podcasts, like half of the country, it would seem. How many people are making podcasts?
Somewhere close to that. No, there are a lot of people making podcasts. One thing that we discovered in our efforts to kind of spread the word about the awards was no matter how many podcasts we reached out to and said, hey, did you know about the Australian Podcast Awards, we would end up hearing from a whole lot of podcasts that we'd never heard of and didn't even know existed. So I think that's one of the things with podcasting, is that discovery is quite difficult.
So with so many people making podcasts, how do they make a good podcast so that they would then get noticed?
I think the key to making a good podcast is to firstly have a great idea or something that you're really passionate about, and then to tell it in a really just well-crafted way. Having a good story and telling it in a really neat way.
So it's not just about finding a microphone and sitting in your bedroom and chatting.
Well, and you can make a really good podcast just by having a microphone in your bedroom, but still, really thinking about your audience and what works for them.
What have you found are the most popular genres?
Arts and entertainment is really popular. Whether people are talking about a TV show or types of painting, or going to art galleries and reviewing, or talking to actors or writers, that's a really popular one.
Yeah, also documentary is very big in Australia. We've got a lot of great ABC podcasts, as well as independent and other media organisations making great documentaries. So it's that's a platform that a lot of people are using as well.
In fact, documentary is one of the genres in the Podcast Awards. Let's go through some of the candidates for the awards. They're still being judged, so we'll be bipartisan. First of all, Not by Accident. What's that about?
So Not by Accident is about a lady who, she got to a certain age and she decided that she wanted to have a child. She didn't have a partner. So it's about choosing to have a child as a single parent, and it documents it from the start. She's now got a little 5-year-old girl. So
she was actually initially a documentary television producer. So the podcast is actually a result of her documenting the sounds of her life over about a 5-year period of time, and just turning it into a great audio documentary.
Now, one that we're very familiar with at the ABC is Trace. Tell us about that.
Trace is the ABC's foray into true crime podcasting. It's had immense success. It's one of the 6 finalists in the documentary category, and I believe it's based on the uncovering of a murder trial of a cold case from 1980. And I understand that because of the podcast, there have been a whole lot of new developments in that case.
And what about By Association and Losing Paul? They're another 2 on the list.
So By Association is actually a sports podcast done in a documentary style. So he won the sports category last year, and so he's in documentary and sports again this year. Yeah.
And Losing Paul?
Losing Paul is by the Canberra Times. So it's a sort of a deep dive journalistic look into prescription medication addictions, and follows the story and basically the death of a young man through that, and opening up, sort of looking into that story.
Well, we better round out the finalists then, because we also got another ABC one, The Sum of All Parts.
Yeah, Sum of All Parts is actually an amazing departure into exploring storytelling through, I guess, starting with the idea of different phenomena to do with numbers. So numbers and mathematics, and then it's sort of the human side of those stories is very hard to define, but it's a fantastic podcast.
How numbers relate to everyday life, sort of. Yeah.
And finally, The Rule Book.
The rule book. So he was a criminal lawyer and he left his job basically to make a podcast and tell the human stories to do with all things to do with the law, basically.
Yeah, crime seems to be a common thread here.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, particularly in the documentary category. There are often a lot of true crime and crime interesting.
What is the beauty of a podcast then? I mean, I'm trying to think when podcasts started appearing. It's fair to say, I guess it's been the past decade where they've just grown. I'm trying to think what were we doing before that with our time.
The radio?
Yeah,
I guess.
well, that's right. But, you had to find the time, didn't you, to tune in at the right moment.
Exactly.
Well, that's it. That's the big difference, I think, is whilst radio is still, creating amazing content, podcasting is really the on-demand version of it. It's the idea of being able to explore very niche topics, very specific topics, that could be the result of the work of any number of producers all over the world.
Just very quickly, we are out of time, but if anyone wants to make a podcast, is it as simple as maybe just recording it on your phone? Can you do it that way?
I mean, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got a great idea and a good way to tell it, you can use your phone.
And a gap in the market.
And a gap in the
That's
market,
spotting
yeah. And then, you can get a better microphone. And you could start on your phone.
And, tune in to see who the winners are of the
Yes.
Australian Podcast Awards on the 5th of May.
And if people want a good podcast to listen to, just go to the website and look at all the finalists.
Finalists. All right, that's good to know. Thanks so much for your time, Anna.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.